Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 7 of Catch Tea If You Can. I am your host, Tamaa Alyssa, and today I'm excited. We have a good friend of mine and CEO founder of Femtech Salon, powered by My Comma, a pre-accelerator community amplifying diverse femtech founders by creating a more connected and intentional ecosystem to thrive. Rachel, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. We met about, what is it now, like maybe 3 or 4 months ago at a Techstar networking event.
Yeah, I can't believe it's only been 3 or 4 months. I feel like it's been ages.
It honestly feels like ages. And as soon as I met you, I know I express it all the time. I was so grateful, just because I consider you very inspiring. You just always have so much value to bring to our conversations, whether it be personally or professionally. And that's something that I really appreciate and wanted to say thank you. And I appreciate you making time for this podcast. I know when I met you initially, I told you I had a podcast and I wanted to get you on at some point. So I'm glad we're finally making this happen.
I finally made it into this world and I'm equally grateful. I just think that, it's really interesting. Doesn't seem like 3 or 4 months, but we've done so much together.
We've done so much.
We're both from a work capacity, whether, we're sponsoring and supporting amazing women and non-binary founders in various tech and healthcare spaces to hanging out, going to the pool side. So
Yeah.
I think these are sort of the rich memories, right, of good friendship, and I appreciate that.
Abs- Absolutely. I think that's what else is cool about once you become friends with somebody that you've met within your network and go to all these networking events because it just makes it that much easier. It doesn't feel like work anymore. So
Yeah, and I think that's the whole goal, right? Especially when you choose entrepreneurship, a lot of times people choose that space because they didn't have the freedom to architect what they really envisioned, and
right.
also have the ability or the freedom to work with or surround themselves with people who they really found glimmers from. So, again, all in on adding to the gratitude here.
I appreciate that. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and jump into it. I would like for you to just get into a little bit further of who Rachael Kim is, from a personal to a professional side, and then we'll let it grow from there.
Yeah, so I think if anyone who meets me, I think knows from the get-go that I'm all about driving equity in all forms. Growing, being from the Pacific Northwest around the Seattle area, really small farmland suburb, but which was predominantly white, with having immigrant parents, I had very similar story to like fresh off the boat kind of vibes. And being one of 5 Asian kids throughout my entire school career, right, over 550 people, um and just being able to, whether it was my race, my gender, my age, from both a personal and professional standpoint, it really has given me this foundation to want to advocate in all forms that I can. um, my current form is really focusing on women and non-binary healthcare, and we can talk about sort of how I got there. But how did I come from this farmland, like predominantly white farmland,
Right.
from Seattle to LA, but have lived in Chicago and London for 10 years and worked for the Fortune 100 companies. It really started with the fact that I my parents were really, I'm really grateful the fact that education was going to be my ticket out. So
Yes.
worked my ass off, got all my bunch of scholarships that took me to Northwestern. So I studied economics and political science. And because I was one of the rare ones, I could actually take a full year at London School of Economics too. So that's where my exposure at 20 to an international realm of people with so many more ideas. The way I talk about that year in London is how a lot of people talk about their year in Paris, right? Like they
Okay.
found themselves, like there's this
Right.
nostalgia. I felt that same way for myself because I felt everything just felt more vibrant. I felt like I had the freedom. I had the flexibility to visit new countries, and I've always wanted to travel. And I think looking back at myself now, I've been very much a nomad for a while. But that was sort of just the start of that. And, I did a double major in political science and economics. It's not like, but what I realized actually graduating from Northwestern is it's sort of a game. I saw a lot of people
Right.
who did like history and got like 4.0 GPAs who went to private wealth management, right? So at
Right.
the end of the day, it's like there are things that people tell you what you should do, and then there's sort of the reality of what this structure is or this ecosystem is. And then I've always been fascinated by how people the like social constructs, which is why I chose political science, because it's
Yeah.
political theory, there's government. Why do people, sacrifice their personal rights to be a part of this collective and be protected? And then you have this economic perspective where a lot of economists have been right, right? But when you look at DC, they always fight. And it's because the economists have models which are pretty good on predicting, but that's not how politicians move. And so I was just fascinated by human interaction and human drivers. And that
Mm-hmm.
really led me to, after graduating, I started with Accenture from Chicago from the ground up. It was sub
Okay.
crisis time. So we were pretty used and abused. Chargeability, i.e., that's something of which, and unless you can charge your hours to a client, you would get cut. I saw a lot of people actually get cut before they even started, right?
And what, let me stop you real quick. What, just in case our listeners are not aware, what is Accenture and what was your role there at the time?
So Accenture is, you have to think of it as like a big tech strategy firm.
Okay.
People know the Bains and McKinseys of the world. What you don't know is a lot of the strategies that companies pay 2+ million for have to be enacted and operated and actually made to life. And that's where a lot of the time Accenture came in.
Mm-hmm.
They started sort of at the systems integration or building tech area,
Okay.
but they built it out to include strategy as well as operations. So they actually own sort of like that end to end. And I was a part of the strategic portion of it. I mainly focused on business strategy, but also data strategy because at the point in time, cloud deep like data mining, being able to monetize data was sort of a new thing. And
Right.
helped a lot of Fortune 100 and 500 companies one consider that as part of their business strategy. And then on the back end of it, here's my geekier expertise that I fell into, which was information security and data privacy, which now everybody knows about. But back
Exactly.
then, being like, I was like one of out of the practice, like 5% of us were women.
Right.
Like it's literally, I chose a techie field, which was male dominated. And then I chose even a more specific male dominated field. And that was the whole point, was to help them protect it, but also be good stewards to data, right? And so
Right.
now the rising topics of that is happening now, right? It's just like, okay, you see GDPR being talked about, people are now getting sued, or they're being fined for not being good stewards of customer or personal data. And so I was actually really at the beginning of that.
Mm-hmm.
That was what, 2008.
Yes. I
And
was going to
then
ask that. I was going to ask you to throw the year out there just because I want to kind of uh, get that focus of the fact that, one, you were in tech straight out of school,
yeah,
right?
I was.
So the experience is really there. And two, I feel like tech seems like something that's so new in terms of an industry and something that, we may get into.
Yeah.
So to know that it was 2008 for you, just kind of, paints the whole picture as far as you being an expert within the industry. So I think that's important for the audience to know and understand. 2008 is when you
Yeah,
were
2008 was,
jumped into the industry.
yeah, when information security and data privacy, I would say cybersecurity as a keyword started popping up because people
Yes,
like getting done with cloud, the word cloud and what the cloud is. And
exactly.
there's these industry trends, but it's interesting because all the AI stuff that's happening now, we were already doing for customers 10 years ago.
Right,
Right. So,
exactly.
I love the fact that I'm now outside of that bubble or microcosm to be able to articulate, but also plan fun community building events with, celebrities who have very smart or pointed topics or investment thesis around AI and the implication of data, and what does that look like from a personalization standpoint, and what's the IP, right?
Right.
It's sort of like the new wave, whether you're a creator or whether you're in healthcare. But just going back a little bit, yeah, so I built a career basically being niche, having my niche, having that. By the time I left, so I left Accenture on my 10-year anniversary. I left as a senior manager, but I was also their global data privacy expert. So
Right.
that would mean I would be deployed to clients to sell projects or manage programs, sometimes be an advisor and also build things from scratch. So my Accenture experience was really good because I had to learn the entire sales process without me thinking it was a sales process. Because
Exactly.
the reason why people, I would be sent into, there's this German investment bank. We have never historically supported them in the cybersecurity area. I came in and worked with their chief security officer, and we stayed there. It started opening up new multi-million-dollar opportunities, and I stayed on the client for at least 2 years, right? And I was a
Wow.
woman in Germany,
Right.
right? Uh,
Right.
in a niche area. And I think that's just what it was, is I recognized my niche skill sets were going to get me somewhere, and how you package that and moved helped me have that career, which I would say was at a faster pace than most of my peers. I did hit walls though. So there's definitely bamboo ceiling, glass ceiling, whatever you want to call it, that I had to fight against, because I would get the holy trifecta of ageism because I looked younger, but
Exactly.
I was still younger at the same level, and then my ethnicity, and then, my gender. So hence why I love driving equity in all forms, right?
Yes.
These are all the same threads, which led me to actually have a breakdown. I almost died,
Wow.
which is why I had to leave my corporate job. And that was, it's what I
So,
needed.
your breakdown, that was driven by just the pressure of the role and, or,
Yeah. So there's because of that holy trifecta of you had to be better than your male peers. You couldn't step out of line. And then you would get sexual harassment. You would get a lot of attention. And I was very much the type of person, and you'll just, like, people know me. I never wore anything low top. I was very conscious of what I wore. I was very conscious that it was, hit at the knee. Um, Whereas I would see all these analysts, wearing whatever they chose. But if they bent over, it was a little bit indecent. And it was an environment where, and this is not just within, it was like all aspects of work. It could have been the client, it could have been, at home. But yeah, it just created a lot of things where, especially because I built them a multi-million-dollar business line, that there's pipeline of over 20 plus million that I was sitting on and helping across globally. And then I had sold. So this is the whole thing of the rat race. And, they I think corporates have an interesting way of incentivizing you. It's just like, well, you're just not good enough yet. You're just not good enough yet. And even when I walked away, right, I don't think anybody expected me to get in Forbes. I don't think they expected me to pop up in podcasts. I don't think they expected any of that stuff.
do you feel like that undermining and lack thereof expectation from your peers is what drives you,
Yeah.
right?
I really, from the get-go, it's not, this goes back to parental things, but my parents were the type of people where just like you were expected to do good things. And if you did them, they didn't say anything. You would only
Right.
get noted if something, negative happened, or if you
Exactly.
were performing. And so I think I have always been the underdog. I've always been the underdog in every single aspect of my life. And being able to experience that continuously, right? Whether it's through college, whether it's through work, it just made me realize the fact that, like, okay, well, all I've been through, all those experiences, everything I've learned was for something. And the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to go travel around the world, backpack. for a year. I thought it would be 3 months,
And
but
it turned into.
I ended up being a year because I was so burnt out. And what caused me is I had 4 doctors telling me I needed to change my life. And one of them was the corporate doctor, and the 3 others were other experts. And it was really burnout, the significant anxiety and depression. So how severe it was, I wouldn't go out of my, for someone who ran around all the time, then got to a point where I wouldn't go out for like 4 or 5 days out of my apartment.
And I think that is a point that's very important to expound on, because I don't think that people understand how real burnout is.
I mean,
This is
it got
real.
it is
It
real.
it goes beyond just being like, come on, have a strong mindset. You can do it. You're being weak. Burnout is real.
And burnout is the signal that you ignored yourself and your body for so long.
Exactly.
So,
It's one of those things where you can keep going and tell yourself, but at some point, your body is going to make you sit down.
I got to a point where I I didn't love my work anymore. I loved my clients. I didn't love the internal bullshit.
Right.
Um, I didn't. It was one of those things where I lost color, like how I see and sense life and live life, because it just felt the same thing but different kind of feel.
I
And
love that. I love that. I lost color.
yeah, I did like the way
That's
I
such a real
sensed the
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, the way I sensed life was lessened, right? And I've been
Yes.
so lucky and fortunate to live such a rich life, even to now.
Yes.
But that was a period where I truly believed it was a tabula rasa time. I literally had to rip out my entire London life to focus on myself,
Yeah.
try and heal in a way I didn't know. I wasn't sure if it was going to happen, but I knew traveling always made me, and it's scientifically proven now, right? But back then, they were just like, oh, you don't need a vacation. That's the kind of mentality that I was fighting against every day.
Right.
Either because you were either seen as perfect and you were running the show and all this stuff, but at the same time, other people were trying to take you down because of the amount of money you were bringing in that they want to claim,
Right.
right? So it's like literally the it's the rat race for, to be the king. And you can either choose to be part of that rat race or not. And maybe it's because of my personality on top of being an Aquarius, but I'm like, anything that's conventional is just not my thing. And I've always built my career on doing things that were not typical. And
Right.
but it was very close to me. And so I traveled across 4 continents, 18 countries, and I started believing in humanity again. I really had lost my sense with humanity, believing in humanity, believing in beings. And I was just nourished by the small and amazing experiences of someone inviting me home to a dinner that his mother cooked. Just these things where you make these fast connections. And traveling, you have to think differently than your normal state because you have less time. A lot of the time things are in flux, things are shifting. And so how you manage and control your feelings around that, how do you
Yeah.
manage change? Can you go with the flow? It was really just a great palate cleanser to my corporate life to enable what I really consider, my formal entrepreneurial life, right? When people ask me about being an entrepreneur, it's like, well, I started giving violin lessons at the age of 9. So I already knew the value of niche skill sets and being able to monetize off of it.
That's what I wanted to dive into, because I know earlier I wrote it down. You wrote niche, and I know that's something even in my career now that I realize is so important and vital to one, asserting yourself as an expert, but two, being able to really hone in on your craft and skills by being niche, right?
Yeah.
So I guess what I would want to say is, what kind of advice do you have to somebody who's listening who feels like they're just kind of more of a generalist within the field that they're in now, or is looking to become niche but isn't sure kind of how to take that step? Because it's kind of like you have to assert yourself and step into that that expert mindset before you're actually an expert, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of things. So I think part of it is the mental framing of just trying.
Right.
Instead of thinking you have to be perfect in order to be an expert. So at the age of 9, I was making money and teaching other kids because I was the concert master orchestra at elementary school, and my elementary school teacher, who taught several different for orchestra, taught at different schools, recommended me, right? So having someone supporting you and recognizing your skill set, but also you just saying, I'm just going to try.
Right.
The same thing goes for, I went to school for, I'm just going to remember, political science and economics. I did not go
Yes.
for physics. I did not go for comp sci or anything technical. But
Right.
what I was able to extract was from my poli sci portion is being able to do comparative analysis, being able to write. How are you able to be persuasive? Can you pull out the main points of something? Versus my economics side was very much, can you model this? Can you break down
Right.
the model? Can you
Right.
explain the model? Can you build it back up?
Right.
Both highly useful skill sets for when you talk about tech. But did I
Right.
come from a tech background? No. Actually,
Right.
it's funny that you say that because my mom, when I was choosing my major for school, she's like, you should do computer science. I was like, no.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, my mother's a smart woman for sure, and she clearly saw the future, but I was just being like, no, that's what everybody is doing. I'm not going to do that. Well, I ended up as a career doing that. But even within, I would say, that fabric of tech teams, because I could talk high level and revenue and what C-suite execs were needing to understand from their systems, and also talk to developers, technical teams, legal teams, and being able to weave that together into a
Yes.
vision, right? This is for over 10 years. You don't have to be specializing in your field in college or university to do that. And
Right.
that's one thing I really want to emphasize, because I was actually on the intake for like my analyst pool. I was one of a small handful who did not have a physics, engineering, comp sci, or some kind of hard science
Right.
background.
What is your advice to that listener that doesn't maybe have the, even the educational experience, but they are wanting to dive into a specialized industry?
So I would say go to the library, get resources. I love Libby. I read, I use it all the time. You do not have to have money to have an education. 2, find one, find people. Actually, if anything, I think you learn faster from other people than you do from learning theoretical knowledge. It's about, I would say, street smarts. Like I would like to say I have a little bit of both to be able to survive.
Yes.
But it's
Yes.
not, and yes, in some circles, having that academic background is important, but those aren't your spaces. It's find your
Yeah.
space, find your people who support you, who find at least one advisor who's willing to take a chance on you, and being open in the fact that you don't know. And that's
Right.
okay. But
Yes.
your whole point is to learn.
Yes.
Just learn.
Yes.
Because the worst thing is finding an amazing mentor where you refuse to learn and refuse to listen, even though you have this goal in mind. It's like the most
Yes.
infuriating thing. And so I would say those are, being scrappy about it. There's so
Yeah.
many free online courses, whether it's YouTube, there's influencers who do it as well. But I'm very much like, I need people in person, having just one person in person in your life, to, they can specialize. But I think there's also another aspect of EQ. Someone who has high EQ in your life, who knows how to navigate and work with people. Like, that's a whole other skill set where the most successful people have it and they built it over time. It's
Yes.
not necessarily innate. Maybe some of it is more innate in terms of magnitude of the starting point, but how you cultivate it as a skill set, how you cultivate it as a way of being is huge.
Right.
And it helps support you, especially, and I'm just going to be quite frank, entrepreneurship is hard. Glamorous stuff is like 5% of it. Other 95% of it, I am like grinding my ass away in my lab, in a corner somewhere, whether it's my room in a recording studio, in some random space that I find. And it can feel incredibly lonely, and finding a network of people around you who support your ideal, because they've done a bunch of studies around this. You are the average of 5 people you hang out with.
Yes.
And so the question is, you have to relook at who you're exposing yourself to.
Yeah.
Do you have people who have similar kinds of goals in their respective areas or for themselves, right? Because together, for sure, I would say you guys are going to do well. If you have people, what's really hard, and also another, I would say, tidbit is I had to cull people in my life. I truly believe you want to be only around people who want best for you.
Yes.
And you have to let go of people who are negative. Um,
Absolutely.
and so some of those things are just identifying that so that you can brace yourself for it and understand it's okay that it will happen. Um, but yeah, no one does this alone. No one
No.
survives this alone.
And honestly, I wanted to jump on, piggyback off of your point of having mentors or, you know, people that will advocate for you. I think that is what has been a major key to my success. And I feel all the time I have people like, how do you know these people? Or how were you able to get to this person? One thing I can say is you would be surprised the amount of people that are willing to help you, or willing to be mentors if you are just willing to humble yourself and say, I don't know. I don't know what I don't know.
Yep.
And if I could just, have some of your time to just ask questions, and if you could just, kind of tell me your story. And then let it grow from there. There's so many people out there. That's why I have so many mentors. And I've been able to switch industries or switch careers because of that. I've had, people who are willing to advocate for me or kind of direct me in a path that I wouldn't know of otherwise because I didn't necessarily go to school to lead me down that path. But one thing about me, I will say, and I think you tell me if you agree or not, what I feel like what makes me successful is that in my own right, because I'm not going off anybody else's measure of what success is, just my own. What I believe makes me so successful is the fact that if I want to get something done, I'm not going to let the fact that I don't know how to do it stop me. I will find somebody. I will, reach out to a mentor. I will ask questions. I will send that LinkedIn message. I will go to that networking event where that person's going to be. Research the person and know some points to kind of throw out in conversation while I'm trying to initiate and build a connection to let them know, look, I did my due diligence. I did my research. I want you to understand how serious I am about taking up some of your time. I respect your time. And, would you be willing to invest in me? Because I'm here to listen. I'm here to humble myself and be honest and say, I don't know. And I need your help, So I think that's very key, that the mentor part is key.
Yeah. I think also just having a really clear starting point for yourself. So for example, I've in the very beginning of when I left corporate and started the transition into entrepreneurship, I was like, okay, who am I now? Right? Like there's all these things of expectations. I lived and exceeded all sort of the normal benchmarks that were laid before me. This was the first and foremost time I had the ability to completely architect and design the life that I wanted, but I needed to know myself. I needed to
Architect
know
and design the life that you
that I
wanted.
wanted for myself, my next chapters, my next set of chapters, right? And
I I don't think people realize that's something that they have control over.
I think because a lot of it has to be, are you willing to sacrifice what was necessary?
What right, right.
So I had to rip apart my London life, completely like pull it under the rug and find myself over a year of like what I truly wanted out of life and how was I going to move and like show up. And I'm going to say this, it took me many years later to understand the exact way I was going to do that. But it started the wider question of like, who am I? And my answer coming back was, I'm an advocate. Now the question is like, okay, an advocate of what? Advocate for whom? And because I almost died, and I would say a lot of aspects of my life were dealing with more women-specific health. I wanted to be able to pivot towards that and use my superpowers for good. And so that's how that really started my path down to femtech. Now, talking about not being in that niche before, I've worked for a couple corporate healthcare pharma clients, right?
Right.
But no one specified or focused on femtech, right?
Right.
And so I actually had to go from not knowing anything to educating myself over a 2-3 year period and being within community and building and adding value to now where, when the Prince of Netherlands came, I was one of 2 women at the table and I represented women's healthcare in LA.
Wow. Can you explain real quick? Can you explain to the audience exactly what femtech is?
Yeah. So femtech really is any technology that addresses, I would say, condition symptoms, situations that disproportionately affect women and non-binary individuals from a healthcare wellness perspective. Now, you may hear that as like women's health, but femtech is sort of it was coined in 2016 by Ep07. She's, one of the founders of Clue. And the reason why it was coined was to bring attention to the fact that it was so under invested in, even though over 51% of the world globally is, I would say, fits the category or is impacted at minimum. Men are actually impacted too, whether they choose to recognize or not, but that's a whole other discussion. And the fact that right now it's a $1 trillion industry, right?
Wow.
This is not small beans we're talking about. When you're talking
Right.
about T's and investment, especially in startup, you're sort of like, maybe you should actually pay attention. And there's some amazing VCs like Coyote Ventures, Emmeline Ventures, that have really focused on this area. But my mission as part of it is, yes, we support and drive women and non-binary individuals, both from a consumer leadership, startup, ecosystem, service provider. But at the same time, you also have to have these mixed teams to be able to bring that intersectionality perspective to build things the right way, right?
Right.
So just to put things into perspective for people, unless the people were actually in med school this as of like last year, they didn't learn anything with a 3D female pregnant skeleton or a skeleton of a woman. If you think about a skeleton in your science classroom, what gender was that?
A male.
Exactly. That was
Yeah.
so if you think about also any other doctor before medical students of last year, unless they really chose to kept up with their studies, and there's very few, who would actually be best placed to take care of women and non-binary individuals from a healthcare perspective?
Woman.
And I would say women, but also just medical students now. So
Right. Right.
think of
Right.
any other doctor,
Right. Right.
looks like
Right.
the
Up to
associations
date.
of obstetricians and all that stuff. Like we weren't involved in clinical trials until technically 1993, but like 96 was actually the start of that. All other research, majority of research, were white male, cisgender male centric. So you're
Wow.
basically saying that any treatment for like cancer, heart disease was based upon that kind of individual stereotype, of which then women were applied, or cisgender females were just no, they were actually seen as miniature men. I shit you not. And so
Wow.
they just did a portion of whatever treatment it was sized, which is completely incorrect when we think about the complexity of a cisgender female's body and the hormones. It doesn't operate the same way. So
Wow.
this is why there's a need for it. This is why there, I would say, is like this renaissance of amazing new founders who have hit problems within healthcare to find consumer product goods or wellness options and provide that instead, because it just wasn't built for us. And so
Right.
you can probably see this is what lights fire underneath my ass.
Exactly.
But for me, it started with I had health issues myself. I also saw as I was traveling the fact that, there were period care deserts, like being at the airport, like people couldn't enjoy their travel, and I'm a big traveler, right? So there are
Yeah.
different aspects where I observed, I read, The Moment of Lift, also the Oscar short film Period End of Sentence one, and when I
Mm-hmm.
came back to the US. So all
Mm-hmm.
these things culminated into being like, you know what? F it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go down this road and start a new area for
Mm-hmm.
myself. And so you definitely just need to try. It's not about being perfect. And I
Right.
think it really is about betting on yourself to know that even though you don't know the answer, that
Mm-hmm.
you know yourself enough to know you will figure it out.
Exactly. So, with all of that being said, can you lead us into exactly what My Comma is, and as well as the Femtech Salon?
Yeah. So my comma basically came from, so when I first came back to the US, I called it untaboo, untabooing this area. But I was creating, I would say, travel packs that you can get from, airplanes, buses, hotels, anything in the travel channels, because that's where I felt like there was no support.
Right.
Like COVID hit. So then I had to go back into, okay, so what do people want? I had actually started building AI stuff back then around it. It was too ahead of a time from a consumer perspective, but effectively it's just pulling data together and being like, okay, people want to personalize their experience. People,
Yes.
not everybody lives the same, especially I would say of our demographic. We move differently, move more than when I would say the first pad and tampon were created, right?
Right.
It's not really as relevant anymore, right? Or we need an evolution of that. So I was starting to pull information together and a framework together, and I came across my co-founder, Aljo Sperber, also another amazing human, and she had a period care box, and she would just bring together different products together monthly, but there was no specific curation. And so after we talked, I helped her with the research. We started doing more eco-friendly boxes because sustainability, you see a lot of the tampon stuff hanging around in the seas. Like I saw it when I was traveling a lot. So I just thought that maybe there could be a more friendlier way or a more sustainable way of doing it. And over time, of like knowing each other, of collaborating for a year, we merged into what my comma was or is. And my comma really means, like, it means the breath you take for yourself. It means all different stages of your life. There's a continuation after a period. People don't die after, not, you can't have children anymore. Like there's
I love that.
also the fact that you are so multifaceted as an individual. That's what my
Yes.
comma came from. And it actually came from a customer on our business, like our business kickoff party. Like with the, we
Right.
actually gave that
Because it was actually called My Lady Box before,
as
correct?
lady box. Yeah.
Lady Box. Okay.
Which,
There you go.
is
Yeah.
not very, I would say not very inclusive. And she had made
Right.
that. I just came onto the scene. And so when we merged, we wanted to develop values and I would say a brand that represented that. And so my comma came to life. And initially during COVID, the way that we wanted to vote with our dollar was to help buy inventory from women and BIPOC brands, BIPOC-led brands, right? That's how we could do it back then because we weren't out meeting brands, right? Physically.
Right.
And so, but we could purchase and then curate these boxes where people could discover new brands for themselves based upon their preferences. And we did, have a survey. And that really evolved because Seattle just got hit with CHOP, the Black Lives Matter. It was the one of the epicenters for COVID. Plus,
Right.
there was a lot of Asian hate that I experienced around that. So there was just a lot during
Really?
COVID where, yeah, coming out of it, I needed to go that was more consumer friendly because Seattle is much more SaaS, Microsoft, tech driven. And I visited New York again, Miami again, and I made my first trip to LA. And I realized that through the meeting of many different brands, that these are amazing founders with no community.
Mm.
And so that's what started our first Femtech salon. It was really the question, like, do people care enough to want to come together?
And
And
create
they
this
did.
ecosystem. Right.
Yeah. And so since then, it's probably about a year ago now, we've had 5 events, and we've had them in Atlanta and South by Southwest in Austin, and be able to combine these amazing communities. But then we started really more of a community events,
Mm-hmm.
I would say ecosystem builder. We are, and
Mm-hmm.
I am I say ecosphere builder because I'm building for the world, but
Right.
ecosystem building for like local and regional communities to have like a
Mm-hmm.
stronghold for us to then connect nationally and internationally. So then that gave rise to the Femtech Salon as an event series.
Right.
And it really just was about getting VCs in, or like keynote people of like, why should people care about femtech?
Exactly.
Even if
Yes.
I'm a man, why should I care? And it's so funny because in all our events we have anywhere from like 10 to 15% men, which is amazing. We never expect
Right.
one. But there's always this one thing, they take a swag bag home, and the swag bag obviously is for anyone who has a uterus or a vulvic.
Right.
And so it forces them to either give it to their partner, their mother, sister, wife, co-founder, like anyone, right? Someone in
Right.
your life. And so it makes a point of like, there is someone in your life that impacts, and therefore you are now having to have one conversation you would have never had. That's really
Exactly.
our focus, is the intimate, intentional, and immersive experience and conversation and development around this area.
I love that though, the intimate, intentional aspect of it. With that being said, how would either, if somebody's looking to be a part of the femtech ecosystem
Yeah.
or looking to participate, from maybe a sponsorship standpoint, what does that process or step look like?
Well, I think just being a part of an event, if you want to volunteer, obviously you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or on our website. From a sponsorship standpoint, we really love working with companies, or we call them partners. Like, yes, you're a
Okay.
sponsor, but you're a partner for us.
Right.
Who There's a long-term play here. This isn't a one-off, we take your money and run. It's very much like we are trying to elevate, amplify, and cultivate these brands from varying stages, from early stages, from
Mm-hmm.
typically MVP and onward. But even if you have like just an idea of a femtech,
Mm-hmm.
come. A lot of
Right.
people, a lot of consumers come because they themselves don't exactly know. They know, but they don't know. And they don't, because people normally associate with fertility. It's so much
Mm-hmm.
beyond that.
Right.
The lack of research, medically speaking, and for the conditions that we have not have the appropriate treatment for,
Mm-hmm.
as I said, varies from heart attacks. Like, women have
Mm-hmm.
attacks differently. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, because we have such a high pain threshold due to our period and other things, that we typically ignore it, even though it
Mm-hmm.
is now they can actually measure on the pain scale what that is.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's fun. You'll see these on TikToks, right? Like men trying like these little sensors around their stomach area to see what a period feels like. It's like, yeah. And it's equivalent to a heart attack. So if a woman is used to basically having a heart attack down in her uteral area,
Right. Right.
and so it's things like that, or ovarian cancer, or even cystic fibrosis looks different in young children, right? And these are things that we're finding out. And so um, femtech is so broad, so broad, that it's such a great thing because people learn. But the reason why we did it as a salon isn't literally an age-old thing where people came together to have fun, learn from one another, and then just make memories. And
Right.
it's going beyond the business. It's really just
Mm-hmm.
seeing people as people.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so what is next for Femtech and my
On.
client? And for
Well,
Rachael Kim.
and for me, well, I would say let's start with Femtech Salon because it's a little bit easier.
Okay.
We have at least 3 more events this year. So whether in New York, Femtech Salon is going to be October 4th, and that's with Oriana Fuentes. We're
Mm-hmm.
working like Women in Tech Hub, Women in Health.
Okay.
We're also working with launching the Women in Bio's LA chapter. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
huge national organization that helps supports women in the life science and biosciences space who are doing amazing work. And we've been honored to be asked to be a partner to help launch them. Right. So
Yes.
combining different communities together. And then we do have in Miami for our as a pre-Art Basel event is focusing on AI as a technology and how that's being used from entertainment all the way to healthcare and like consumer product goods. And what are the tensions around identity? Whether is that an IP question or is that a data rights question, right? So
Right, right.
very interesting things, but this is all building up to the fact that we are going to be launching our cohort early next year.
Can you tell the audience what a cohort is?
A cohort is basically a small group of selected companies who anywhere from 8 to 10 who will be selected to one attain funding, so helping
Mm-hmm.
them financially, but then it takes more than money to move a business, right? So getting them
Right,
the right mentors, but also having them deliver deliverables,
right.
help them build their pitch deck business plan in a more
Mm-hmm.
efficient and effective way to and build the habits around what it means actually being a founder. Because even if the even coming from a consulting background, I would say I would probably was better positioned to be an entrepreneur. Plus, I also did my little side hustles as a kid, but it's still a huge journey. And so
Yep.
finding that crew where everybody's evolving to get there, I think is super important. And that's what we're aiming towards because then instead of just only showcasing and connecting companies to be successful, we're actually help
Mm-hmm.
building them from the ground up. And
Yes.
that's really my focus for this next year. Now, myself as Rachel, as a human being, I
Yes.
am going to start living my summer. So I just moved into a new place,
Yes.
getting settled there. And I think for me, what has helped me is just trying to maintain my peace. That's what I
Yes.
realized. And so just focusing on me.
Beautiful. So, okay, we're about to kind of wrap it up here, but I always like to end it with the pour the tea segment. And what that is essentially, you've mentioned, you did mention kind of having your mental breakdown. But even up until where you are now, a lot of people may look at you and they see that you were in Forbes or mentioned in Forbes, and all these well-known magazines, and like you said, your colleagues probably weren't expecting you to see you on podcasts and getting all this acknowledgement. One may think, wow, life is great for her, things are going well, she's really doing it. Can you let us know what are the sides that the other side of the coin, right? And of where you've done a lot, you've grown, you had your eat, pray, love
Yeah.
moment, but where you are today, what is the side that if you were mentoring somebody, what are the truths that you would give them?
Don't be surprised to be broken down multiple times throughout this journey.
Yes,
The
yes,
process
yes,
is
yes.
real. There are things that the narrative in yourself, you're just like, I would never do that.
Mm-hmm.
I would always do this. You will. People do.
Yes.
I think, but until the account arises, you
Mm-hmm.
truly won't know until it
Right.
happens. And I would say what had made me live or enabled that was like a huge glimmer where I knew that during COVID to take care of my focus on my parents because they were both high risk and they couldn't
Yeah.
go outside. And I couldn't step into my childhood home for like 2.5 years, right? So
Wow.
there are decisions that you make and you have to own them.
Mm-hmm.
They sometimes owning them sucks.
Right.
And then, but there will always be other aspects of like owning, there's always something positive. I do believe that there's
Right.
a silver lining. I think either there was a lesson that you're supposed to learn or something, just something that was meant to happen. And just being open and not egotistical to thinking that because
Mm-hmm.
clearly you didn't.
Right.
There
And really, really nothing is below you. Nothing
Nothing
is
is
beneath
below
you.
you. Nothing is below you.
Nothing is
Oh my
below
God,
you.
nothing is below you. Roll your sleeves up
Yeah.
and get ready
Yes. Yes.
because very few people are afforded what the conceptual idea of an entrepreneur is. And if they have been, it's normally because they come from a significantly different socioeconomic background and network connection that enables them.
Yes.
But I would say
Yes.
majority of
Yes.
the
Yes.
population who chooses this, you're gonna have to hustle. And there's beauty in the hustle. There's
Mm-hmm.
struggle in the hustle, but there's beauty in the I. 3 years later, like had I known all the things I was going to go through, and my friend told me this because I asked him, he was an entrepreneur. He's like, if I told you what I knew, you wouldn't do it. It's
Right.
100% true. So
Right.
with all the advice that I'm giving you, it's at the end of the day, if you know that there's a burning desire that will keep you waking up every morning and just doing it, that's your star, then do it. And I think for me, it's just always been like, I didn't care about how much money I made. And clearly, especially not now. And this is being really
Right.
honest. Like, it takes a
Yeah.
long time to build the revenue aspect, even if you're smart about it, even if it takes time. And patience is a virtue. And it's definitely one of the things where, like, how do I reframe things mentally so I don't go crazy waiting? Right? Or
Exactly.
is there an alternative to accelerate? Like, you just got to get crafty. It's really like a personal mental game um,
Yes.
to do it. And so that's what makes it fun for me, as is like crushing at times for me. Um, but
I think that is a big key takeaway
yeah.
um, in this process is how to reframe things mentally.
Yeah, 100%. I try to incorporate play as much. So maybe we're gonna do it like beside the pool and like be
Yes.
food and drinks and like having at
Yes.
least it's like by the pool and we're working through things and we're still getting it done, but it's not such a mental straining way where like it creates this ultimate dread.
Yes. I 1,000%. And I feel like at times somebody can kind of look at my stories or just look at my life and be like, "You're always out eating. You're always partying. You're having fun." I'm like, I am working. I'm working, but it makes that aspect of the job, that work, so much easier, right? Because you're associating it with a positive little carrot or to get you through that task or whatever it may be. So I agree with that 1,000%.
Yeah.
I want to wrap it up here and say, Rachel, thank you so much for your time. This interview, I feel so far has been one of the best that I've done. You
Aw.
had so many gems to offer, and if somebody wants to follow up with you, whether it be to participate or be part of the Femtech Salon, or just reach out to you with any questions, or maybe they're looking for some mentorship. I don't know if you have time for that, but
Yeah, I do.
how can they get a hold of you? What are your handles?
Yeah. So at my.life for Instagram, message us there. LinkedIn, you can find me, message me. And then email is Rachael, Rachael, at my.life. Those are probably going to be the three best channels to reach us in terms of being able to engage. I do mentor. It's one of those things where I think that's why I built this community, was to be able to mentor people at different
Yeah.
stages in their careers as well as companies. Not everybody I mentor is a femtech. I mentor men who are, they have a food startup and they come to me. So it's not gender specific. A lot of it is my first question or my first thought is like, how much do you want to have like mentorship? How much do you really want to learn?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And do you have a clear idea of like what you want for yourself? Not like down to the T, but how you want to move or progress forward.
Yes.
Those are the two useful things for me. Then I know how we can build a plan. But if you haven't done that personal homework, even just a little bit, makes it really hard.
That is a wrap for Ep07 of Catch Tea If You Can. Again, I am your host, Tamaa Alyssa, and I look forward to seeing you next time. I will be seeing you soon, Rachel, poolside,
100%.
or at the next digital healthcare networking event, Techstars, whatever it may be. I look forward to that. And again, thank you so much.
Oh,
I
thank you
appreciate you.
guys.
Thank you. All right, that's a wrap.